So today we're going to talk about growing and harvesting vegetables year-round. Today's class is a 10-minute university presentation. It's offered in collaboration with and in support of the OSU Extension Service Master Gardener Program. At our website, you'll find handouts, videos, upcoming classes, and workshops. And our program is volunteer-led, and we are supported by OSU faculty to ensure the quality of our content. Now, if you go to cmastergardeners.org, you'll find lots and lots of articles that we have on vegetable gardening. And this is just a few of the many different articles that 10-Minute University has available for you. Now, also, Oregon State Extension also has several really good publications about growing vegetables. And I really want to encourage you to go online and look up these different publications. It will definitely be worthwhile for you to do that. And if you don't worry about remembering the ones I have here on the screen, because you will be getting an email that'll have all these links to the publications that I'm going to refer to today. Now, here are the objectives, and I hope that you will learn these from this presentation today. I want you to know how to grow vegetables over a longer period of time, not just in the summertime. And I hope that you'll be able to match the vegetable types and varieties to the specific season that you're going to be growing them. Also, learn about types of season extenders and how the best way is to use these different season extenders, and also know where to find more information on year-round gardening. In today's presentation, I'm not going to be able to go into as much detail as you will need if you want to garden year-round, but I'm going to give you a lot of information on where to find all the information you need on growing in the different seasons. So, why garden year-round? Well, in the summertime, that's when we can grow our warm season crops, our tomatoes, our cucumbers, our corn, our beans, our peppers, those kinds of things. The nice thing about growing in fall and winter is there are less chores, less weeding, less watering, and there aren't nearly as many pests and diseases as there are in the summertime. But of course, slugs and snails are the exception because they do like our fall and winter rain. Winter is a good time to garden because it gives you a good reason to get outside. It's also so nice to have those fresh vegetables in the middle of winter, the ones that you can't get when you go to the grocery store. And spring is a good time to garden because it will be ready for your earlier plantings, and you will be planting what we call our cool season crops, which a lot of our cool season crops won't grow very well in the summertime. So it's good to get that little bit of a head start. Now, here are a few facts about vegetable gardening. Vegetables need full sun, 6 to 8 hours daily. There are a few that can take a little bit less sun. Your lettuces, some of your greens, and some of your root vegetables, they might not need quite so much sun, but most vegetables will definitely need full sun. Also, most vegetables need a pH of somewhere between 6 and 7.5. Now, if you are in the Pacific Northwest in the Willamette Valley like I am, you might find that your native soil, because it has a lot of clay in it, the pH may be a little bit lower. So you may have to get your soil tested, and you might have to add some lime to increase the pH for what your vegetables are going to want. Also, it's good that your soil contains about 5% organic matter. Now, if you have a full soil sample tested at a laboratory, they will tell you how much organic matter you have in your soil. And if you look up some of the information in the resources that I'm going to give you, they will also explain to you how you can take a bunch of your soil and figure out how much organic matter's in it. So there is information out there that will be able to tell you about 5% organic matter will be just perfect. Also, you want to put your vegetables in a place that's near your water source. You're not going to be one to have to haul hoses or watering cans to your garden. If it's too much trouble to get the water there, you probably aren't going to be watering them as much as you should be. You also want to choose a high spot so that you can avoid any drainage problems or any cool air pockets that you may have in your landscape. Now, OSU did research and found that a 10 by 10 garden will take about 40 minutes per week. and that includes the planting and the cultivation of it. And a 30 by 30 foot garden will feed a family of 4 with just enough vegetables. Now, when someone is new to vegetable garden, they usually think about that in the springtime. That's when most gardeners begin. In spring, the weather's warming up, and people are starting to talk about, oh, I can't wait to put my vegetables in, and you start seeing them in the stores. So that's when people get kind of excited about their vegetable gardens. In the summertime, your friends and your neighbors are talking about, oh, I can't wait till my tomatoes are ripe, or oh man, I want that cucumber sandwich. So that's when people think, all right, I want to put in a garden now. Then in fall and winter, maybe you enjoyed gardening so much during the spring and summer that you just say, I want to continue on. I want to have all those vegetables going into fall and winter. Now, if you want to harvest vegetables and a variety of vegetables, you're going to probably want to start in the spring. Like I mentioned before, that's when our cool season crops begin. So you're going to plant when the soil warms up, but how are you going to know when the soil warms up? You're going to want to use a soil thermometer. And there's information out there also. I can't go into complete details. I don't want to take up too much time, but there's information out there that we have on our 10-minute university and OSU extension about how long to put a soil thermometer in the ground and how exactly it works. So let's say your soil looks like it's warm enough, but now you need to find out whether that soil is actually workable. So you can do what is called the squeeze test. Take a handful of soil and squeeze it. Like that photo you see on the left, if you open your hand and it's still all stuck together, you know that that soil is not workable yet. And if you do work the soil when it is that wet, you're going to ruin the soil structure. So you're going to have to wait a while. But if you squeeze that soil and you open your hand and you roll it around a little bit and it falls apart, then you know that your soil is dry enough to be able to start your vegetable garden, or at least work up the soil and get ready for it. Usually in our spring plantings, we start in March or April in our area. And of course, that would always depend on the weather. And what I mentioned before, it is the cool season crops that you're going to be planting. That means your root vegetables, your brassica family, and leafy greens, and a few others that will be going in at that time of year. Now, there are things that you can do to have your soil ready earlier in the spring. If you're like me and you plant on the flat ground, you're probably going to have to wait a little longer than other people who may have raised beds. If you have a raised bed, your soil is going to dry out and it's going to warm up faster than those of us that are planting in the ground. So that's one way to get your spring plants in earlier. Also in the winter, you could cover your garden area, and that will help keep out the rain, and it also can help warm the soil. You could use black plastic, you could use greenhouse plastic. There's a material called row covers, which I'll talk about, or some people even just put coffee sacks over their soil, just so the hard winter rains don't compact their soil. And you can use season extenders. So what are season extenders? Well, season extenders are any method that allows a crop to be grown beyond its normal outdoor growing season. So it is what the name says. It extends the season, the growing season. They can include raised beds, cold frames, high tunnels, black plastic mulch, row covers, and cloches. Those are all types of season extenders. They either will warm the soil, or some of them will warm the air around the plants, and some of those season extenders will do both. And what they do is they create this kind of like little microclimate, maybe like a little tiny greenhouse for the plants to grow in. And I will talk a little bit about specific season extenders a little bit later in this presentation. Now, weather can be a problem when you're gardening, but there are some things that you can do to overcome these issues. So in the springtime, what kind of weather problems are we going to have? Well, we might have a very wet spring. And if you do, you might have to hold off planting. You might not be able to plant as soon as you want to, or as soon as you expected to. Also, if you already did plant, you may find that some of your seeds may have rotted and they might need to be replanted. Now, if we have a really cold spring, the plants may have to be covered at night or even during the daytime. If you know that there's going to be maybe a frost is expected, or there's going to be a really cold night, you might have to cover and protect those plants a little bit. Sometimes we do have hot, sunny springs. And if we do, the cool season crops, because they don't like hot weather, hot, sunny weather, they may need to be shaded. Might need to shade them a little bit. You can see that photo at the bottom of the slide shows a shade cloth put over that raised bed of leaf lettuce and other things that they have in there. And you might find that they need to be watered a little bit more. Also, when the weather is hot, plants have a tendency to what we call bolt, and that means they go to seed. And when they go to seed, your plant's probably going to disappear. And even if you did pick some of those lettuce leaves after it bolted, they probably wouldn't taste very good. And that is the other thing about leafy greens and lettuce. They do become bitter when we have hot, sunny spring times. That's why they are considered a cold season or a cool season crop. Now, the summer garden is when most of us do our gardening. So most of you that are watching this right now are probably already thinking about getting your summer garden in. Maybe you already grow a summer garden, but you're wanting to learn about extending your harvest into the other seasons. But if you are a beginner gardener, I would suggest that you start out with a small summer garden. That way you're going to know how much effort and time it's going to take put into your garden. And then maybe next year you can extend it. You can make your summer garden a little bit bigger, or maybe you can start in the spring. Maybe you decide to go ahead and garden year round. So summertime is the time for our warm season crops, like tomatoes, beans, peppers, corn, and other things like that. Usually we plant those in May in our area here. And if you're in a different area, of course, you would have a different time schedule for it. And that again would depend on the weather. You will be putting in either seeds or you will be putting in plants, which we call transplanted crops. So you can seed your beans and your corn, your tomatoes and peppers. They would need to be put into as plants, because if you've tried to put a tomato or a pepper seed in the ground, we do not have a long enough season here for them to be able to reach maturity and be able to harvest those. Zucchini and cucumbers, some people put them as plants, some people put them in as seeds. Now, I mentioned corn is being seeded, but some of you might be right now saying, wait a minute, I can grow my corn in the greenhouse or in my house, and I can put it in. And some people do put them in as little plants. So not necessarily only seeded for corn. Now, here are some things that you need to remember about the summer garden. Okay, you're planting summer, your things are coming up. You might want to save space for what we call successive plantings. In other words, if you're planting lettuce, say your lettuce, it might get bitter after a little while because it is a cool season crop. But if you plant those leafy crops like lettuce and other leafy crops about every 2 weeks, then you can harvest the fresh little tiny, the new growth, and it will be nice and sweet and succulent. And what you need to remember too about the summertime is after harvest, you might need to save some space for your fall vegetables. Your fall and winter vegetables are going to be planted in the middle of summer. So if you're using the same space for your summer vegetables that you're going to use for your fall vegetables, you might have to make sure that you have enough space in there. And I will talk about that a little bit more later. Also, you need to learn the crop families. You need to rotate those crop families because plants in the same family tend to have the same problems, the same insect problems, and the same disease problems. This is a list of crop families, and this list is in the OSU extension EC 8701, Vegetable Gardening in Oregon. You will find this list. You will also find this list in a lot of other publications too. But this will give you an idea that if you are going to plant broccoli for a summer crop, and you're going to plant broccoli for a fall and winter crop, you're not going to want to plant them in the same area. You're going to want to rotate your crops. So that's what we mean by rotating your crops and learning the crop family. And of course, in the summer, there also may be some weather-related problems. So you might have cool summer temperature. So if you do have cool summer temperature, your seed germination is probably going to be a little bit slower. You're expecting those seeds to pop out of the ground, but if the weather isn't warm enough, they might be a little bit slower. And plants also are not going to grow as quickly if our summers are cool. And that means your harvest may be delayed a little bit too. Now, some plants, if the summer is cool, may rot or get what we call damping off disease. And that's if we have a cool, wet summertime. And damping off just means your plants are starting to come off the ground, and all of a sudden they just sort of fall over, and it looks like the stem of them have rotted off. That's what is called damping off. Also, cool summer weather can make the plants stunted. They can stunt their growth and also produce poor quality vegetables. Now, if we happen to have a really hot summer, and we have had a few of those in the past in our area, continued heat can cause things like leaf scorch or leaf drop or even sunburn on your plants. And the stress from the heat can also cause your plants to maybe be misshapen. And also, unfortunately, you may have some bitter vegetables if the summer heat, if we have one of those big heat events. Then if we have a wet, rainy summer, if you have too much rain and overcast skies, it will slow the growth of your plants, which will also affect the blossom production. And you know, in your tomatoes, if you don't get enough blossoms, you're not going to get enough tomatoes. Also, you need to be not very often in our area, but I'm sure in a lot of other areas they do. Do they get some really, really heavy summer rains? If we do happen to get a heavy summer rain, that heavy rain will leach out all the nutrients that are in your soil, and then that can cause a soil deficiency. So after a heavy rain, you need to think about whether you need to do a little bit more fertilization or put a little bit more compost or mulch or something like that on your summer garden. Now, we have had, like I mentioned, we've had some hot summer events in our area in the past several years, but there are some things to do to protect your plants if that happens again this summer. And you can apply mulch around the plants, and that will help to retain the moisture. You can water your garden early in the morning, and you probably is going to need another second watering, maybe during the day. Also, you want to provide a little bit of humidity with into those plants if it's a really hot heat wave, excuse me. Now, some of you are looking at that picture saying, we're supposed to be saving water. That's why we always suggest drip irrigation or soaker hoses. But remember, if we're having a heat wave, soaker hoses and underground watering might not be enough. You might need to cool those plants off a little bit, and spraying them onto the plant with water will not only cool them off, but it also will provide a little bit of humidity. But make sure that that plant is dry enough when we go into our evening hours. We don't want to cause the humidities to still be high during the afternoon or evening hours. You can also use a shade cloth or protective row covers to put those over your plants during a heat wave. Also locate, if it's a time that you had to plant new transplants, make sure that you plant those new plants in the cover of the taller plants. So if you have a taller plant, put a little short plant so that it gives it a little bit of shade. And try not to fertilize your plants during a heat wave. Wait until the heat wave is over. Now, if you're going to grow a fall and winter garden, you need to be sure that you plan ahead, because the fall and winter vegetables are planted during the summer months, right when your other vegetables are growing and you're harvesting some of them. So vegetables for fall and winter are our cool season crops, just like our summer. Excuse me, not our summer, our spring. Our spring are cool season crops, our fall and winter are cool season crops. So you need to decide which crops you want to grow. Then you're going to need to find out the planting dates. You're going to have to look for the suitable varieties, and you're going to have to plan whether you're going to need any season extenders. The planting dates, our Grow Your Own publication from Oregon State Extension has a really good planting, vegetable planting, that the picture that you see on the screen, dates for planting your vegetables. There's other publications that also have that information out there for you. Now, the challenge to a successful fall and winter crop is getting your plants in the ground at the correct time and getting them established enough before fall and winter arrive. So that may be difficult because we have really hot, dry summers around here. So you might have to give those new plantings a little bit extra care. So you can start your seedlings indoors or in a greenhouse so that they'll be ready to put out into the garden earlier. You can use a shade cloth. You can see that picture in the middle of the screen, how they've used a shade cloth to put over their newly planted plants. Those plants are the ones that are going to be growing for fall and winter and harvesting in fall and winter. And using overhead water to cool the seedlings down, just like I talked about in a couple slides ago. Now, there are a couple types of fall and winter crops. There are your quick growing ones like peas and radishes and greens and spinach, who you will put in and they will grow quickly and you'll be harvesting them. Then we have our overwintering vegetables, such as our root vegetables, our brassicas, bunching onions, fava beans, and garlic. Those are ones that are going to take a longer time and they're going to be harvested later in winter. Now, you can find plant lists and planting dates in a lot of different places. OSU, I've already mentioned these, but these are two excellent publications. One is called Winter Vegetable Production for Small Farms and Gardens, west of the Cascades, actually. And the other one is our Growing Your Own publication. Lots and lots of good information in there. I would really suggest that you get these and look through them. You can get them online. I know that I'm not going to be able to give you all of the information you need today in this small presentation. So getting these publications will really be helpful. The other thing that's helpful is seed catalogs. Seed catalogs have so much information in them about planting dates, planting times, the types of vegetables to plant for specific seasons. But try to use the ones that are regional to your area. You don't want to use a seed publication or a seed catalog from, say, the hottest part of Texas, because I'm sure that they are going to tell you a different time and a different type of plant to use than we are here in the Pacific Northwest. Also, there's a lot of really good gardening books out there that have to do with year-round gardening. Cool season gardening and the Winter Harvest Handbook are really good ones with a lot of good information in them. Now, summer planting examples. Here's what I was talking about when I said your fall and winter garden plants have to be put in the middle of summer. So our late maturing crops, which are going to take about 90 days to reach maturity, 90 days before you can harvest them, those are planted around mid-July. And that would be, you can see the list there: beets, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, etc., etc. All right. Now, we have what about mid-August is what we call our mid-season crops. These will take about 60 days before we're able to harvest them. And you can see that list also too. We have some early cabbages, some early carrots, some kohlrabies. You can see a few of them you need to put in as transplants. Others you will be able to put in as seeds. And then we have our early maturing crops. Those ones are going to be put in mid-September because they're only going to take about 30 days before you can start harvesting them. So your broccoli transplants, leaf lettuce will need to be put in as transplants. And then there are a few other seeds that grow quickly that you'll be able to harvest. And October is the month planning to plant your garlic and your fava beans. But remember, I mentioned those publications. By looking through those publications, you will find this list of all the different fall and winter crops and about what time it is that you can put them in. Now, there are varieties that have been developed especially for spring and some that have been developed especially for fall. And you will notice this list that you see up here on the screen. You notice that the fall ones have kind of a cold name to them, like Rudolph and Winter Red and Winter Boar. It kind of gives you an idea. Also, you may notice that, I guess I'll give you the tip first, that curly leaf vegetables will tolerate the cold better than your smooth leaf vegetables. And dark colored vegetables absorb more heat. So those are better also for fall varieties. So take a look at those names again. Do you see the fall one? Purple sprouting broccoli, red for red kale. And you notice that picture of the purple kale? So think about that when you're planting your fall varieties. No, you don't want kale that's going to be those smooth leaves. You want the kale that's going to be curly and as dark as possible. And all of these names are listed in so many different publications and in the seed catalogs. They won't be hard to find the information that you need. Now, I said I would talk about using season extenders. So season extenders is this technique that we use to prolong the harvest of our tender crops. And it also, into winter time. And it also helps us overwinter our otherwise not hardy crops in the spring. So when used properly, these season extenders can add a month to your harvest on either side, early or late. So season extenders are a good thing to have around ready to use. There are what we call low tunnels. And I know many of you have probably seen photos of these. What they are usually, they're hoops, and they're usually made out of either PVC pipes or electrical conduit or electrical wire. And they're covered with greenhouse plastic. And they usually they're wide enough to cover a row or two of your plants. There are also hard tunnels that are similar that are available to be purchased. But if you do purchase them, look for some that are called dripless. They do have dripless plastic, and they also do have dripless, dripless greenhouse plastic too. And the reason you would want to have dripless one is because of the condensation that might form underneath, and then the water would drip on your plants in the winter, and that would cause a lot of foliar diseases to come in. We also have a season extender, what is called floating row cover, and many of you, I'm sure, have seen this or have used it. It is a finely spun fabric, and it allows air and water and light to transmit through this. It can be used a couple different ways. It can be used as a tunnel, where you make your tunnel and you put it over it, or because it got its name from floating row covers, a lot of people just set it over their plants, and then they somehow attach it down to the ground, but they leave it loose. So as the plants grow, that the plastic, it's not plastic, this fabric can lift itself up with your plant because it's very, very lightweight. Sometimes you may hear them called Rime. Rime was the first company that started inventing these floating row covers. So some people may still be calling them by that name. Now, cold frames are usually small boxes that create this greenhouse effect around these small plots of land. They're usually covered with either plastic or sometimes a plexiglass or even glass. There's two different ways to use these cold frames. Some of them have a bottom wood on or something on the bottom, and some of them do not. In the top picture, you can see that this cold frame does not have a bottom on it. In other words, it was just set over these plants, and it was used to help these plants have a little bit more protection from the weather. It also, these cold frames will lift up, as you can see in that second photo. You can see that they can lift up to let air circulation and other light in and be able to water them, of course. Sometimes people use cold frames to start their plants. They would have a bottom on the cold frame and use propagation mats, heated propagation mats, then they use these to start their plants with. Now, if you, in the summertime, you're growing your root crops and they're still there in the fall, but you want to harvest them and you don't want to harvest all of them at the same time, what you can do with these overwintering root crops is put leaves or straw or something just to give them a little bit of protection from the weather. And here's something special. Did you know that a light frost on your root crops will actually add some sweetness, taste to them? So you might want to do this experiment. If you are growing carrots this summer, harvest some of those carrots and taste them, see what they taste like, and then leave them in the ground, put some leaves or some straw over them. And then after a light frost, not a hard frost, we don't want to kill them. After a light frost, take some of them out of the ground and test them again and see what they taste like. And I think you'll find that they are quite, quite sweet. So the vegetables that you plant in the middle of summer are harvested at different times, okay? These are for your fall and winter vegetables. So before that frost comes in, you need to make sure that you harvest all your bush beans and your sugar pod peas because they do not like frost at all. Then there are some that are harvested fall through winter. So your broccoli and your cabbage and your cauliflower, you might be able to harvest some of those in early fall. You might be able to hold them over and not have to harvest them until later in the season, later in the winter. Then there are some that are not harvested until early spring, and that would be maybe Swiss chard, spinach, parsley, and your onions. And then, of course, our garlic, which is planted in October, is not harvested until the following summer. And it will all definitely depend on how early you get these plants planted in the summer. That will depend on how long it's going to take you before you be able to harvest those vegetables. Now, if you've mainly just been a spring and summer gardener and you think, I'm not quite ready to grow in fall and winter, you might want to try hydroponics. I have two master gardener friends, and they both tried hydroponics this winter. Marie grew her lettuce and greens in mason jars, and that's the picture you see on the left. Those mason jars are covered with socks because we don't want any light to get into the water that's in those jars. And Sherry, she grew lettuce and basil and spinach and Swiss chard in 5-gallon buckets. And both of these ladies had such success with their hydroponic growing that it has really inspired me that next winter I am definitely going to give this a try. Now, both of these ladies use what is called the Crafty method. And I can't go into details right now, but we do have links to these links are to, excuse me, we do have links to publications about this method. And we also have several weeks ago, I believe, no, it was in March, we had a webinar just on hydroponics. So if you go to 10 Minute University webpage, you can find you can find the link to the webinar that this gentleman gave on hydroponics, and it gives you all the information that you need to know. And that is why these two ladies were so successful with their hydroponics this winter. This photo, just quickly, I'm going to show you this photo. It will show you how hydroponics work, and it has a supply list. There is no soil involved. It is just water and a special type of fertilizer that is used. So these plants are clean. They are also usually, because you are growing them without soil, they are usually pest and disease free. I mean, if I go back a couple slides and show you these pictures of these plants, it kind of amazes you. I know it did amaze me when I first saw them, that they can grow these beautiful, beautiful plants by just using water alone. All right, that's all for now. So I will have my co-host Cheryl join me. And if there were any questions, I'm hoping we can answer them for you.
Hi,
Hi,
Jane.
Cheryl.
What a perfect day for you to talk about growing vegetables. It's so beautiful outside and makes everyone eager to get planting. We did have a couple questions though. One question is, in rotating crop families, how far apart? She's worried about, she probably has limited space because she's being wise and not making too large of a garden. How far apart is recommended?
You know, that's a great question, and I wish I would have thought about that. Cheryl, can you maybe help me with this? I would say is 3 feet too close?
I think 3 feet is about right.
Yeah.
What I kind of tried to do was I have to keep a log because I have very, very poor memory. And so I draw a diagram of my garden and I just kind of make sure that I make them flip-flopped from where they were so that I don't, and I keep a log of what I planted and where, otherwise I'm completely lost. And for
Yes.
some reason, you just feel like you want to put the tomatoes there when you probably put them there last year. So you just need to write it down. That's my garden advice.
Exactly. Also in that one publication, Vegetable Gardening in Oregon, there are some actually photos that will show rotating crops. So that if she looks up that information, I'm sure it'll give her a better idea than I can.
And I found that enormously helpful when I was doing a lot of vegetables. I've downsized, but it's very helpful. Shading plants. One person wanted to know what percentage of shade do they need to shade their lettuce or their, how do they know if they're shading them appropriately?
Right. And you know, I don't believe there's really been any specific research that would say you need a shade cloth that's only, 75% or 90% or 30%. So it's going to be a little bit of an experiment on their choice, put up some shade cloth or put up something. And if you think, oh, it looks like they're not growing that well, or that they're just not enough, that maybe they're not getting enough sun. Or if you put some up and you say, they're still looking a little brown, or around the edges, then you maybe need to get a little bit more shade. I really haven't seen any specific research about that, and it'll depend on how hot it is too.
Exactly. And, monitoring often. I think that's the one thing about your vegetable garden is for insects, for diseases, fungal diseases, and
Yeah.
and for too much sun, not enough sun, you just need to monitor them frequently. One of the question was, are those hard tunnels, those hard plastic tunnels, difficult to find?
Probably a fellow master gardener had them in her home. She sent for them somewhere. And when I was making this presentation, she was saying, please do mention these. They do work really good because they're so convenient. You just lift them off and put them back on. They were a lot more convenient for her to use than having to put the plastic over the tunnel. So I'm afraid I do not know where she got them, but I'm sure it was at online. She got them online
Okay,
from
I saw
some
them.
type of company.
I think I've seen them with them at, Amazon carries them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
here's a great question. This individual does not want to contribute to global warming, and she's trying to get away from petroleum derivatives of any kind. And I think row cover is probably a polyester product that probably uses,
It is. It is part polyester. Yes, it
right.
is.
So she's looking for another alternative. So like a sheeting or some kind of fabric, cotton fabric.
There is now, do you remember on one of our other ones, Cheryl, when Leah was talking about tooling, the tooling that
Or
people
so I
use,
think,
like
yeah.
wedding dresses and stuff like that? I
Right.
believe that is cotton. Is it cotton?
You'd have to look at it comes in a couple types. You'd have to check the label and make sure it's cotton. But yes, I think I would go to the fabric store and kind of do some
Yes.
looking around to see that
Yes.
something's kind of transparent, but would still
Mhm.
provide the same thing.
Definitely. That's a perfect idea, and good for her for wanting to do
I
that.
agree that we need people more socially conscious. And we
Yes.
had one other question. It was about carrots, and several people have asked that when I've been in other places. What are your tips for successfully growing carrots? People seem to be having a struggle with their carrots.
I get that question a lot. I don't have trouble with carrots, so I don't know. I don't know what problem people are having. I do know
Right.
one thing, getting them to germinate is probably the hardest thing. So when you plant them in the ground, you maybe want to cover them up. This is what I do. I cover them up with a really lightweight potting soil. I don't use my natural soil to cover up my tiny, tiny seeds. So I use a nice lightweight potting soil. That way, when the seed does germinate, it can come up through the soil a lot easier. The other thing I do that some people might not agree with, because I know it takes a little bit more time, I plant them a little bit thicker in case they don't have a really good germination rate. But then I do have to go through and thin them. That takes a little bit of work, but at least I know if I plant them specifically apart and some of them can't germinate, then I don't have as many. But also people are trying seed tapes now, and that is something I just tried this year. I planted half my row by hand, and then I made some little seed tapes and giving those a try too, to see which works.
Perfect. What a great experiment. Because the one question I get when we talk about seed tape is, well, what if the seed doesn't germinate and then you have empty spaces? So I said, well, there's always the poke the seed method. Poke a new seed in their method.
Yeah, exactly. But
Well,
remember, if these people are having trouble with their springtime carrot, they could try planting them in summer and having them for a fall crop. See, maybe summertime they would, germinate a little bit better with the way it's going to be. So they might give it a try and see which works best for them.
I agree. And I just think really your garden is a big scientific experiment. You can try different things and find out what's works very best for you. Oh, here's an answer for someone who knows about fabrics. Tulle can be made of silk, but it also listed our plastic-based materials like rayon and nylon and polyester. So if you go to the fabric store to look, you're going to have to be discerning about if you want all cotton, you can ask that clerk at the fabric store for a little bit of help.
Good.
Okay, and you know what? That wraps up our questions for today. Great session.
Right.
I think your advice about starting small expand your garden when you find out what your capabilities are and what you want to manage, because it does take time. As I said, monitoring, as you know, is the key to a successful vegetable garden. And
Yes.
the resources you gave, you need to read them and reread them, because the question you had at the beginning
I do.
changes over time.
Yes.
So great
Yes.
job, Jane. Thanks so much for your advice.
Thank you.